So Chapter 9 deals with presentation aids. So today we'll talk about the different types of presentation aids that you can have, some things to consider when designing your presentation, and what you should and should not do when it comes to some presentations. So I'll show you a couple of slides from some presentations that did not listen to some guidelines in the past, and show you what you probably shouldn't do. So why do these things matter? For a lot of people, it's something that can help guide the audience through their speech. So sometimes you have to show complicated graphs or So why do presentation aids matter? There are different types of presentation aids that can show some credibility to a speaker. They can help outline some important information that didn't make sense before. I had a speech once in the past where a student told us about the eye, but to really show how the refraction happened within the eye. Again, I don't science or math, but when he did show us how the eye worked and how we're able to see images, he had a really intricate diagram that he had made on a poster that he then showed to the class. And so he showed us how these things work and sort of the intricacies of our eyes. And so that helped convey information in a better way, because had he just explained it verbally, I probably, and I'm sure most of the audience would have had a harder time understanding. And so there's different types of aids that you could use. You could use a poster, you can have a prop, you can have a PowerPoint or a Prezi. You are required in COMR 103 to have a PowerPoint or a Prezi for some of your speeches, so make sure that you're using one of those two formats. But they can also help listeners retain information. Some people are are visual learners, some people are audio learners. We all learn in different ways, and so depending on learning style of your audience, you might need to use a certain type of presentation aid to help convey that information. And so I know a lot of students are visual learners, and so I use PowerPoints in my lectures, both online now and in person, to help convey the information. Again, there are different types of presentation aids. You are required to use a Prezi or a PowerPoint in this class, but depending on your audience, depending on what's available in the room that you're giving your presentation in, that will determine what type of presentation aid that you actually use. When making a PowerPoint or Prezi, there are some important things to think about. You wouldn't think that it's, apt to talk about font sizes or colors or those sorts of things, but that's really important to consider, because consistency helps make you look more professional, which then helps your speaker credibility. I very highly recommend that you think about how far the audience is away from you and how large you make the text on your PowerPoint. If you're in a very small room, then the text size doesn't matter. If you're in a large lecture hall, then making sure your PowerPoint screen, when projected on the projector, is large enough for even the people in the back to be able to see. You need to make sure there's good contrast. So can you actually read the writing that's there? I've seen lots of times where folks like colors that are too similar and then the text bleeds into the background. So some people like to bolden things, underline them. Use your voice instead. If there's something you have to emphasize, change your tone, change your delivery. Those sorts of things are better than overusing bold italics and underlining on PowerPoint presentations. And using both uppercase and lowercase letters. And then once you decide to do that, be consistent. There are 4 problems that I see. 1, you don't practice with it. So you need to stand in your living room with your humans that are listening to your speech with your computer next to you so you can show us a presentation aid. So it's very important that you find a way to practice with it, because we need to be able to see your presentation while you're giving a speech. Sometimes people use the wrong type of presentation aid for your audience or for the occasion of their speech. We'll often over rely on it. So we'll read from the PowerPoint, we'll stare at the screen behind us too often. And so sometimes we need to make sure we're using our voice and our words rather than the things that are on the slides. And then if it's not appropriate for the occasion or your audience, that could be another problem. So some things that I think are important. So be consistent, pick a PowerPoint template. They are so easy. Some of them are very pretty. Just pick one, it's useful. Other things that I think are important to highlight is to use your speaking outline. So some folks will print out their PowerPoint slides or outline from PowerPoint and use that to write a couple more notes on and speak from that, because if you have your PowerPoint behind you, you might be looking at a computer screen with your PowerPoint and you have notes in an outline, you might get lost going from PowerPoint to notes. And so thinking about a system that works best for you is important. In some instances, you really need to think about a backup plan. So what happens if your PowerPoint doesn't work? Can you give your speech without it? What happens if you forget your prop at home? Can you still talk about the object or the occasion as well as if you didn't have it? And so thinking about a backup plan is really important as well. 7x7 rule, try as much as I have more words in these PowerPoint slides than I normally would because you can pause and read, and because it's an online lecture and it's just a video recording. But typically you want to think about the 7x7 rule. No more than 7 words per line or 7 lines per slide. So that would make it so you don't have as much clutter on the slide that you're talking about, to make it a little easier for you. So these are some slides in the past that I would not recommend mimicking for the purposes of your speech. This was a graph that was shown on a very small screen. It's very hard to read things. It's very hard to see how these things interact. And the student that gave the speech about this graph, or this diagram or chart or whatever you might want to call it, didn't explain it very well. So we're all staring at this, trying to understand what it is, when they're still talking and giving their speech. And so we're focusing on a graphic instead of focusing on the speaker, because this graphic is very distracting. This was also some text on a PowerPoint slide. They changed every line to be different fonts, different bolds, different sizes. And so when you see this, you're more distracted by how it looks rather than what it says. And so instead of doing that, try and be consistent. Don't use as many words, those sorts of things. I would also avoid transitions between slides when they fade in or the letters drop in one by one. Those things are very distracting. I think just a click and point and go is a very better way to be able to not distract your audience, make sure they're focusing on you as the speaker instead of focusing on the PowerPoint.